Today, I'll show you two Christian movies with the same budget. One looks like it belongs in a theater, and the other looks like the filmmakers didn't care how it looked. And no, the issue isn't the budget. Christian films aren't bad because they don't have money, quite the opposite. They have a bad reputation because of bad theology and a careless approach to filming. Because when Christians misunderstand the art of filmmaking, we end up with movies that don't just look bad, but misrepresent God, the master storyteller. One of the most common issues with Christian movies is budget. A few of you have pointed out that the comparisons I make between well-done films and faith-based movies are unfair because of the huge difference in budget. But today, I'm showing you two films that have a similar budget and yet look miles apart in production value. If you paid attention to the thumbnail, you'd know that the two films I'm comparing today are Nefarious, with a $1 million budget, and Christian Mingle, with a $650,000 budget. We'll circle back to this, but first, why do Christian movies look bad to begin with? Even if a few diehard fans enjoy them, most people you talk to would describe Christian movies in one word: bad. Like I said earlier, more often than not, the issue isn't just the budget. It's the result of poor planning and execution. And there are plenty of movies made on shoestring budgets that look great. And we'll cover that when we talk about Christian Mingle and Nefarious. Even among higher budget films like God's Not Dead, the lighting, while far from terrible, is uninteresting at best. And I get it, the Christians who praise these movies like the message, but do you think God feels honored when the movie looks like no one cares? And how likely is the message to reach people if the movie looks like the crew had no idea to light the scene in the first place? When I saw my very first Christian film, I was disappointed. Instead of an amazing film, I was met with bad lighting and a low production quality. Thankfully, there is a Christian movie that does a better job of this. Unfortunately, movies like Saving Christmas and Christian Mingle are common, and good movies like Nefarious, which we'll talk about, are rare. Even if a decently large fan base enjoys movies like God's Not Dead, the majority of people recognize them as cinematic disasters. Take a look at the comments on my videos if you don't believe me. I'm not saying that these movies don't have their place. People watch them or they wouldn't be produced. However, these films are rarely recognized for amazing cinematography and rich lighting. And that's probably because these movies focus on the message instead of the artistic aspects of filmmaking. So with this in mind, let's look at the do's and don'ts of Christian filmmaking. One thing that bothers me about Christian films is that they look as if they were thrown together without visual intentionality, as if the technical choices were made as an afterthought. Christian Mingle lacks contrast and depth in their shots. It looks as if the crew threw a soft light into the scene so that it wasn't pitch black, and called it a day. Now, this isn't just me throwing shade on Christian filmmakers. Unfortunately, this issue is widespread, and you won't have to look hard to find it. It's difficult to make an engaging movie when the lighting looks terrible. This is why Christian movies almost always look bad. We've been afraid to openly critique these films because they have the Christian label on them. But just because you're a Christian doesn't mean your film is any good. Your heart may be in the right place, but if your lighting looks like a home video from the early 2000s, nobody's gonna watch it. By the way, the problem with Christian movies isn't just limited to lighting. I wrote down my actual reaction as I watched Christian Mingle, which reminds me, in the movie industry, anything under $5 million is typically considered low budget. Nefarious had a budget of $1 million. Christian Mingle is not far behind at $650,000. Now, just to prove that the problem isn't low budget, here are some other amazing films to compare to Christian Mingle. Films like Rocky, The Ring, and Enter the Dragon all have budgets around $1 million. Despite a low budget, they have had a worldwide impact because their stories are relatable and well made. Another movie I think we should add to that list is Nefarious. This film gives me hope for Christian filmmakers. The first thing that struck me was how natural and crisp the lighting was. Something as simple as contrast and depth greatly enhances the overall look and quality of a film. What I love about Nefarious specifically is that even though it's low budget, the shots feel very intentional. It evokes a specific tone through the dynamic composition and careful use of shadows and highlights. The smooth camera work and sharp focus also add to the intentional and carefully planned feel of the movie. On the other hand, another bone I have to pick with movies like Christian Mingle are the bland environments. With movies, the filmmaker has to choose locations that not only fit the story, but also enhance it. And Christian movies, for the most part, do neither. The locations are bland and uninteresting, which takes focus away from the story and onto the low quality of the film, and that takes you out of the story and the characters that are taking place in the movie. Nefarious, on the other hand, has unique locations and a carefully planned color palette. If you want an example of great filmmaking on a shoestring budget, please watch Nefarious. Not only is it well shot, but the dialogue is definitely the film's strong point, something that I can't say for most Christian films. It has memorable lines, and both the main characters are believable and interesting. The actors did a fantastic job. Now, you may have noticed something peculiar about Christian films. They all follow the same format, and there's a reason for this. Filmmakers who are in unions or have to report to a larger corporation must meet certain requirements in their films. Christian movies do something very similar. There's always a church scene, a breakup, or a character struggling with faith. In fact, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any faith-based film without one of these tropes. However, if the only point of Christian movies and these requirements is to get the message into the audience's head, I believe it contradicts what we stand for. The message doesn't justify mediocre art. If we, who are made in the image of God, are supposed to make ugly art, then that would mean that God creates and enjoys ugly art, which is the complete opposite of his nature. That's why beautiful lighting and cinematography make all the difference, not to mention all the other aspects of filmmaking like sound, set design, and the actual story itself. If you're enjoying this video so far, please check out my channel membership. I offer a lot of behind-the-scenes footage and a private Discord server. If you're interested in that, check out the link in the description below. When filmmakers start out, it's natural that they would suck as they learn the ropes. Early work is expected to be rough, but the goal is to get better, not treat excellence and growth as optional. In the case of Christian films, communicating the message becomes a higher priority, and the actual craft of filmmaking becomes an afterthought. A question people often bring up is, can an ugly film still move people? Well, just because God uses imperfect things to reach people doesn't mean we have the green light to make terrible films. Some comments on my videos quote 1 Corinthians 1:18, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing." The whole point of me bringing this up is that it really bothers me when people take scripture out of context to justify terrible art. Like I said before, the message doesn't justify mediocre art. This is part of the reason why Christian movies look and feel so bad, because the gospel is being forced into the movie. Art is meant to be beautiful, thought-provoking, and enticing because it mirrors the beautiful nature of Christ. We serve the master storyteller, and we're not doing a good job of honoring him by creating movies that make fools of ourselves. God makes beautiful art. Think of David's Psalms, or the priestly garments, or the tabernacle. In Exodus 31, God fills Bezalel with the Spirit of God to give him knowledge to make artistic designs. Beauty and creativity are inherent to the nature of God. If we want to impact millions for Christ, the best way to do that is to make movies that reflect God's beauty. Nefarious is a great example of that. The shots look clean and purposeful, and the dialogue is sharp, unlike Christian Mingle, which looks dim, flat, and has uninteresting characters. Movies are meant to be beautiful and artistic because God is beautiful and artistic. If we truly want to reach people for Christ, we need to follow his lead and make art that is cinematically and thematically pleasing to watch. Some of my favorite movies like Hacksaw Ridge, Lord of the Rings, and Violet Evergarden all exemplify beautiful colors, lighting, and a theme that inspires. The message is magnified because the visuals are crafted to be eye-catching and lead you into the story. If you found this insightful, I think you'll appreciate my video about why forcing the gospel in films undermines good storytelling. God bless.